everyone. Welcome back. This is Tribeca New Music, and I'm here with the wonderful Natalie Ballenger, who is performing in returning the Ordeal of Olive Oatman on October 2nd at the National Opera Center. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So to start out, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your musical background, and how you sort of got into modern opera?
Yeah, I kind of came to modern opera in a roundabout way. My grandmother was a straight theater actress, so she kind of pushed me and my cousin lovingly and thankfully into the performing arts. So it started in more straight theater and musical theater for me. So I started doing professional musical theater and stuff like that at around 11 years old. And then not in college, in high school, kind of junior high school, I started doing more classical music as well, adding that into the fold because of my second grade teacher, Johanna Mueller, her brother was an opera singer out of Germany. And she had us doing little excerpts from Hansel and Gretel, the opera by Humperdinck. We would learn it in English and German, just like tiny kid versions of it. She was like, you should do this someday.
That is
um,
so cute.
it's definitely like she and my grandmother, Carmelita Pope, kind of pushed me into this direction. So in high school, I started doing more classical stuff and then studied vocal degrees at Eastman School of Music for my undergrad and University of Southern California for my master's, and then have just kind of kept my fingers in all the different pots since. Worked with New York City Opera. I did a world tour of West Side Story as Maria, Beauty and the Beast. So it's just wherever I can kind of fit myself in this crazy career.
Yeah. That's so exciting. It's so interesting because I don't think I've met someone who does like both. I
Yeah,
feel like
and
people
it's
choose, and it's annoying too because it's like, why can't I do both?
because yeah, I've had this conversation a lot because I feel like both worlds are so much more similar than we think, especially when you look at the golden age of musical theater. You really do need those rich, gorgeous classical voices for it. But even in contemporary opera or contemporary musical theater, oh, I'm fully blanking on his name, but he sings at the Met and is also in *Anne Juliet*. But he sings at the Met and is in a pop musical on Broadway, and Kelly O'Hara, of course, as well.
Right.
In the hours at the Met, Broadway superstar.
hmm So how do you tackle, opera versus musical theater? What aspects are the same?
To me, honestly, vocal techniques are all the same. It's just like, and I like to refer it back to dance, how ballet is kind of the foundation for everything, but out of the ballet technique, you get hip hop, tap, jazz, contemporary, modern. It's kind of the same. I feel like classical voice has the ballet aspect to the vocal technique, and then you branch out from there. It's just different stylizations versus technique. Belting and singing opera at the foundation fundamentals of it is all the same technique to keep it healthy and being able to do it either 8 shows a week or an opera slightly less a week.
Is there a difference between Eastman and USC, East Coast, West Coast?
I grew up in California, so I'm always like, I will always love California. So the weather's definitely better at USC. I'll tell you that. Different, I mean, just different groups of people. I think fundamentally the same ideals, wanting good techniques and good product out of it. I had at Eastman, my teacher, the almost year ago, late great Carol Weber. She really was supportive of my want of staying in all the different worlds. Sometimes in the classical world, you get a little pushback, but Carol Weber was definitely understanding of it and really taught me good foundation. And she also was one of the people that brought my love for contemporary opera because in a lot of contemporary opera, there is a lot of combination of styles. Like Jake Heggie has always been a favorite. In high school, I saw the premiere of To Hell and Back by Jake Heggie, which was Patti LuPone and a lyric soprano, which I'm fully blanking on names this morning. But a lyric soprano and a Broadway singer just created with a Baroque orchestra, and it created this amazing magical piece that kind of also tipped my love into contemporary modern opera.
Wow.
Yeah.
I always advocate for musicians and artists to be very well-rounded and
Yeah,
citizens of every sort of genre and style. And it seems like you embody that fully,
yeah, and
which
I
is
think
so exciting because
yeah,
that's what we need more of.
yes, exactly. And I thankfully had support at Eastman between with Carol, my teacher, Dr. Miller, who's also recently passed. He was a coach there and was very supportive of that. And Professor Stephen Daigle, who recently retired from Eastman, he directs all different kinds. So he started some of my first jobs out of college were with the Ohio Light Opera with him, which were everything from operetta styles to musical theater. And I got to really, in a summer stock type of way. You got to really explore and learn quickly. And then USC was great too because they had a class that I was obsessed with where you worked with vocalists would be in there, and then there'd be poets and composers, and you kind of got to work with different groupings of to create all new music as well, which I thought was really cool. USC was really awesome in terms of expanding that love of contemporary opera because they really support it there and really love it. And with all the film stuff, and you get to kind of meet all these different cool new composers.
Yeah,
And LA,
multimedia.
I feel like, has a lot of good contemporary music festivals as well, which was really cool to start expanding into. More people you meet, and then you get to do fun projects like returning because I got connected in because of Jerry Steichen, our maestro, working with him in a different project. And 2 years ago, we did Elizabeth Frankenstein with Ed.
Yeah.
Jerry was like, "Hey, we got a project that I think you'd be great for. You want to come in and do it?" I was like, "Sure." I happen to be back from COVID in New York City. Let's do this. And then that led to returning. Continued to get to know Jerry, and then getting to meet Ed and Maryanne through Elizabeth Frankenstein, which has now led to returning.
Yeah. So how does Frankenstein compare? Sort of, that was probably your first project with Ed and Maryanne. And so now how did it lead to returning in terms of your process?
Yeah, I guess just familiarity with Ed and Marianne's writing. I mean, they're completely different shows, of course. Elizabeth Frankenstein was definitely they're both roller coasters in their own ways. But then also, Ed got to know my voice and where I like to sit. He's such a great collaborator. They both are, in terms of like, hey, this feels not right, or for me, the performer, or maybe the character, and they're more than willing to be like, yeah, this is sitting too high for too long. Let's change this, which is always great. They're such wonderful collaborators. So I feel like coming back for a second project with them, they took what we talked about the first time around and then already had that in place for this character.
So, what are you bringing to the performance of yourself into Olive, and how is it taking on the role of Olive in this show?
It's always interesting taking on somebody that's a real person. Not somebody that I was super familiar with before, but was so, I can only think of the word spicy for that time. I mean, just the fact of a woman having a facial tattoo at that time. I mean, it goes back to then, circuses started with the freak shows and all of that. It was so unheard of. So it's always interesting to bring ourselves into something that we would see as much tamer in today's world. But she has such a rich history, and I do love that she felt more in tune into the indigenous life, which at the end of the day, we all should be, especially with all the climate stuff. It feels very poignant because we all just want to get back to the roots of what is beautiful about life. And we are so lucky to live in a world that has such gorgeous natural things, and that we should appreciate them more. And growing up in California, I definitely had that because I had the beach 5 minutes away and 15 minutes to redwoods. So I definitely connect very hard into that part of Olive. And just the way Ed writes musically, it really does feel, it's easy to get into the arc that she has because she is scared at the beginning, scared and meek and younger. She ages throughout because she's a Mormon, was taken by the Arapai tribe, enslaved by the Arapai tribe. With her family was massacred, and she and her sister were taken. But then the Mojaves rescued them and then became part of their family. Her sister died in a famine. But then army, the American army stole her back. So it was just this whole different growing up and not knowing who you are, but then really falling in love with the Mojave family and just constantly trying to reconnect back into that while her blood brother is trying to make some money on her story and wanting to anglicize and put a religious spin onto it, of that she was saved by God when she just feels like she was saved by nature, and felt most at home in there.
It is very interesting to see sort of how heavy this story can become and how you can really take this character on.
Yeah, she's so interesting and so complex, and finding that throughout it all, she has so much strength because she survived so much, but there is such a meekness and just, it's like when you're in a foreign country, you don't know the language, which I've traveled a lot through West Side Story and Beauty and the Beast. Most of those were all abroad, and you just learn, the strength of the confusion of like, I'm just trying to figure out where to go with no internet access.
Yeah.
It's great because you're just immersing yourself in a different culture, but that whole meekness of like, I'm just trying to figure out where I fit, and then you get that. You find those communities and where you feel like you fit, and then all of a sudden are picked out and thrown into somewhere else where you don't feel as much akin to, but you're supposed to, because that's how you were born, and it's this blood relation to these people that don't feel like family, and finding her strength and her power back. Though the strength was there all along, but where she really truly feels it in her own way.
Yeah. And that things are not as clear cut as history presents itself. Being more comfortable in an indigenous tribe seems totally out of character for, a white historical story that focuses more on the white society aspect.
Yeah, which is also interesting in this discussion of stuff that we are constantly having now in a 2023 world about real history and the real historical look backs on everything of like what was actually happening versus maybe some of the versions we were taught growing up in school.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting look at some like real history behind this woman, and maybe not always the savior is always maybe not the right person.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it, I think. And definitely it's interesting to see how a woman moves in a world also that, back in the day, that was not a powerful place to be, simply to be a cis female.
Yeah, women were there to be married.
Yep.
Create more future children.
Not
have a lot of agency. I mean, even in the 70s, we started getting agencies in the 20th century, and we're still fighting for it. So it's always interesting to look back at the 1800s female, or cis female, and see the similarities and differences.
Yeah.
We're lucky to be in a 2023 world, but there's still a long way we got to go.
Yeah, of course. So with Olive, the character, are there new techniques that you've used with the libretto and the score? What has sort of technically, musically challenged you, and what have you worked on with the character?
Yeah. Because they're great collaborators and they are cool with us trying things, which I love. A lot of it for me has been color and text painting. Like at the beginning, more in the more meek places, utilizing straight tone and different vocal techniques to make the sound still present in there and resonant, but a younger sound or a scared sound through the different vocal techniques, and then growing into more of her power, into more of the full, rich, real voice in there, and really playing with that and utilizing Maryanne's amazing words to continue to contextualize the text painting within it all. So that's been a lot of the fun in terms of techniques that I've been having, and then just adding in real emotion and real rawness, because operas can have real emotion too. Opera singers are actors as well. Sometimes the world likes to forget that, but adding the real true emotions on top of it, just like we would in a musical or a straight play, but just in a more legit legato line.
Yeah, we have emotion. I mean, I don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm not an opera singer, but
well, but we all know the stereotypes of opera singers, and
yeah,
Old Guard sometimes still likes to play that, where it's just
the park and bark,
and that's it. Yeah, the park and bark, vocal line only. But we can be more interesting than that.
definitely.
If we all we wanted was the gorgeous singing, which we still get with acting, you could sit home and watch it or listen to it on Spotify or an album or a record or whatever you want to listen to. We want to have the performance aspect as well. Tell the story, not only in our voice, but the full body experience.
So pivoting just a bit, we ask this question to everyone, and that is, what sort of advice do you have for becoming a successful professional musician? I know it can be tough, even expense wise, even, artistically wise. How do you stay true to yourself while creating a job that supports you?
Yeah, I will drop her name one more time, Carol Weber, at Eastman. She was very pivotal in a lot of this in terms of the classical side. She said, we all want the version of it that comes from you. You got to be true, and people are either going to like it or they're not, but you want to be truthful to yourself. But in terms of advice outside of that, it's a lot of just persistence and patience. I hate the word patience, and I was told it all the time. Because it's true.
I'm not patient.
I'm not patient at all. We all just want to, especially in this like social media world, that instant gratification. But in terms of career, it just takes, and some people get it. Some people get it right away, and that's great. But then they have to be the patient to keep it. We all want to be the Angela Lansbury's of our lives, or the where you're doing it forever. I mean, unless you want to retire, retirement's great. But it's one of those, we get into these performing arts because you can do it forever. I want to be 99 and Betty White still doing it because I love it. But it is so much patience and persistence to just like keep getting yourself up every day and trying to meet new people, especially in this well, we're still in COVID, but the post comments of COVID of your networking groups. It is so important to, in all realms, TV, film, musical theater, straight theater, opera, who you know. So just getting to know people has been really helpful in my own career, of like not necessarily setting out to be like, oh, I need to know this person, this person, and this person.
Right.
That's great. But the people, especially at the levels that you're coming out with, the composers that you're going to school with are going to be tomorrow's big composers.
Right.
So on the ground floor and just meeting people in your programs, meeting people at auditions, at performances, like going to Tribeca New Works Festival shows and meeting people through those.
Right.
You just never know who is going to be, friends. We all like friends, but then leading to future collaborators and future composers and people that will give you your big break. You just never know. So it's a lot of patience, persistence, and practice. It's a lot of P's and just practicing. There's a lot of really amazing, talented people that never get the chance, and there's a lot of really amazing, talented people that get the chances, and you just always have to be ready. The only thing we can control is what we put out into the world. So as long as I am happy with what I do and that I'm ready for the audition or ready for the performance, and I'm happy with how I present myself through it, whatever happens after it, I can't control it. So as long as I'm happy with it, I will be mostly okay with the outcome. Sometimes you get so far into a process that you can start tasting the role. You're like, it's fine. And so sometimes it happens and you're like,
darn.
But then you give yourself your 2 hours of sad grief and you move on, because there will always be something. What is meant for you will come for you. You just have to be ready for it with our patience, persistence, and practice.
Ooh, you should write a book and
right?
say PPP and then
Or, oh my gosh, I just combined all the words. Patience, persistence, and practice, because everything really does fall into those three categories that I found for my own self.
Yeah. And there's so much behind it. It sounds so simple, but it's really not. I mean, you really have to be so dedicated. You have to really believe in it. And
yeah. And if you don't come with a lot of money, that's okay. There is ways and versions to do it. Whether it's, I know, especially in the classical world, it's a lot of money up front.
Yeah.
Your audition fees, which is why I think
teachers,
teachers, coaches, all the things, gowns, everything's expensive. But there are great ways to figure out how to do it too on a smaller budget. But one of those is really not turning our nose up to crossover careers, because you can start getting paid for things,
right?
Performances while you're still waiting for your voice to mature.
Mm-hmm.
And you start meeting new people and all the cool things. I mean, what an opera singer I know was in the Blues Clues movie. You know, they had him singing. There's a part of the Blues Clues song, but opera style, in this one little section.
That is so cool.
You never know. Like, you can still be true. Like, if you're like, I really only want to sing true classical styles, great. But those exist outside of what we know as classical music.
Right.
Styles come into play in specifically Golden Age musical theater, but still contemporary musical theater. I mean, Anne Juliet is all pop songs.
Right.
They have an opera, and he is singing it in true opera style, all of them. And that's part of his character, and it's all fun. So there is so many different ways that you can still have a true classical career in so many different factions of the performing arts as we know it.
Being flexible.
And willing to put yourself out there and try weird things.
Yeah.
Because you just never leave.
Yeah, and it's so admirable to have that mindset. I think people get so caught up, being blindsided by the fact that they can do this one thing. I mean, certainly I'm a violinist, and before I moved to New York, I was completely classical, and coming to New York, I did exclusively modern music by living composers, and that changed my entire worldview and it changed everything about me as a musician, because I realized you can't just be blindsided by the fact that there's one path, because there's so many opportunities.
Not in school that it's like XYZ, but there's a whole alphabet of paths.
Exactly. And the best way, the best musician is one that can do anything. Exactly. And so thank you so much. This is such good advice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like the Highline Quartet does a bunch of quartet or classical quartet stuff, but then they also got hooked into, which I've done concerts with Candlelight, so this is how cool. Quartet. But they're doing tributes to Taylor Swift, but it's all classical quartet versions, BTS, all these cool things. We were doing Christmas stuff last year at Christmas in a more traditional route, but then we had some fun other things. So they're doing the Nutcracker Suite, and then we're also doing like pop versions of Christmas things all in the same concert. And they would do Winter from the Seasons. So it's like they're doing a wide scope of things just in one concert, but then their next concert will just be all Taylor Swift music, but just like the classical quartet version of. And they're all amazing players that are also like subbing in at the Met Orchestra and New York Phil, and just doing all cool things, cool and different things. Even the New York Phil is doing a bunch of different styles.
Yeah. All of these large organizations too, I think, are branching out, which is great.
The Met hasn't done it yet, but I'm sure they will. But every other major opera house in the United States has done a musical. Who can sing Sweeney Todd better than a bunch of classical musicians? And that's the orchestra you want to hear playing it, too. The worlds need to combine. We're all the same. It's just slightly different style variations within it all. It's my soapbox I will always stand on and believe in.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to see you on October 2nd at Returning, the Ordeal of Olive Oatman at the National Opera Center.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much for being here. This was fantastic. I'm going to take your soapbox and I'm going to go stand on it because...
Yes, more people.
Yes, 100%.
Changing the performing arts one day at a time.
Absolutely.
We're the new guard.
You really are.
Yeah.